We'll roll right through this. Welcome to the Soul Fan Podcast. I'm Diana Marquetta, and on today's episode of part 2 of the interview about our shadow work, our darkness, and the spiritual community, we welcome once again Fola Veritas, who gave us so many insightful concepts, opinions, and ideas about really what's happening with us, with our shadows, what's happening in the spiritual community. And I think also at this time, she wanted to talk a little bit about Atlas and how that's moving into Earth's atmosphere and maybe shaking things up a little bit. I think everybody has different opinions about that, but let's just go into it because I think everybody does have different opinions about that.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Crazy.
Yeah, that three-eye atlas spot. Yeah, I've been sitting with that more and more lately, just like contemplating what it means that there are external, like cosmic bodies entering closer into our field, on Earth, and what that means, just the same. If we think of that's like the macrocosmic perspective. So the planets and how they interrelate with each other in like this heavenly kind of sphere. And then we have our microcosmic bodies that we could say like our own internal solar system and how we interact with the things inside ourselves, but also, other humans, other environments, and whether or not people perceive. This isn't, to say like three-eye atlas are aliens and there's these things that are going to happen. And, there's this up leveling and that like really out there thought form. I think it comes down again to the influence that these like bodies, celestial bodies have, just like our interactions or relationships with the people around us can also impact our day to day. And so, if I walk into a room and there are XYZ people in there, some of whom elevate my consciousness, like, maybe bring a sense of joy and gratitude and enlightenment or awareness to me. And then there are other people there who contribute to more maybe unconsciousness. Those people that maybe complain a lot or like in the like negative mindset. We are, as these individuals, going to be impacted by those experiences. So of course, how could we say that from like a larger macrocosmic lens that these bodies, the planets, the stars, comets or interstellar comets or whatever might be heading into our field again, how could those not impact us or influence our consciousness? And that's kind of where I'm just sitting with, okay, what is this? Right. And from the lens of the glass half full versus half empty, not the fear perspective necessarily, but rather like what wants to be gained here. And that doesn't always look positive though. That's one thing I think that when we talk about shadow, the whole like love and light mentality and just focus on the positive. That's not what I'm saying with this. It's like, even in the difficulty or in the suffering, in the darkness that comes sometimes, how can we grow or evolve? And that makes me curious what this will bring.
It's interesting how I've heard every perspective from it's an indication of galactic attack. It's engineered. It's the highest form of connection we've had with the galactic universe. So nonetheless, I think whatever, as you said, is in our auric field, whether it's personal or whether it's planetary, it does have an effect on our energetic systems. Internally as people and then internally as the earth. And, we're just little beings running around on this planet. So we have to be affected by it, whether we're aware of it or not. I think people are grappling with it.
Yeah, totally. And who knows what I was watching the NASA conference on it. And it's just like really hit home for me, I think, especially when we're talking about shadow and we're witnessing all the things happening in governments. I'm sure you may be witnessing it down in the States. But this like concept of what structure, what structure looks like, what it means, what government or authority looks like and how that's starting to shift. And I can't help but wonder how this is even tied to that. Like, we are going through this complete like up leveling of our view on government, rulership. And here in Alberta, where I live, there's been a lot of things happening where like our government has kind of like stripped away different rights of like the trans population. The teacher union, they made a ruling decision when the teachers were on a strike that they had to go back, even though they weren't happy with the new like union agreement. And so I'm seeing these like little experiences that humans are having with authority and structure at this point in time. And it's like, oh, as we, enter into these new stages, the next few years, based on like, I think a few different spiritual views, like human design and their 2027 shift that's happening, that whole like age of Aquarius, like there's so many things happening that I think are really going to make us realize, do we just listen to what someone's saying? Like NASA in the conference, are they just telling us what we want to hear, what they think we need to hear? Or are we going to like demand truth and do our own inner reflective work too, to find out what's true for us at an individual level?
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with that. There seems to be, it feels to me as though there's almost a pressure if we're not just walking around in some protective shell. This all sort of brings everything internally to light. I don't really have a choice in some ways because there's so much, I feel this internal pressure as a result of what's happening externally, galactically speaking. So I'm sort of forced to deal with the internal shadows and truths. And as you said, like what really is true for me? Is it true for the collective? Is it true for what's happening here? Is it true? Is this just an illusion? Which really it is, but still we're experiencing it. So how does that, play out for all of us?
Yeah. And I can't help but wonder like how much of it, especially as we think about like this evolution of humanity into more the like individual self, but that doesn't mean like isolation self. It means more the like non-conforming self, the self, like letting the internal sun inside each of us shine and be what it wants to be, following one's true will. Like there's all these different terms that we could like use. And that can be hard. I was listening to the like Emerson, his like self-reliance essay, which I just want to say Mitch Horowitz does like a great narration on Spotify. Like there's like an audiobook that he has there. And the reason I went to that was because the quote in the Insight Timer app was something like, what is it? Oh my goodness, I'm going to butcher it now that I'm on camera. But it's like, to be great means to be misunderstood. And I think that just like highlights like everything. And self-reliance, he's just really talking about the need for individuality, nonconformity, especially in a time, I mean, for him, it was very much social structures and status, but he's like liking it to being more like nature and just being in your flow and allowing yourself to express yourself as each day comes. And even if that means one day you speak one thing and then the next day you're like, oh, actually, like you said, well, that might not be my truth anymore. Now I feel like this. And that's a tough one when we've like put ourselves in these boxes of fitting in, in high school, say, like people are like, okay, I'm with the emo group, or I'm with the goth group, or I'm with like the nerds or the preppy, whatever. We can like lock ourselves in and continue that like process. But there's something about listening to the self. And I think to me, that's where shadow work, embodying or embracing those like dark parts, those parts of ourselves that oftentimes have been looked at with shame, or we've been felt guilty about them because they're like an innate way of being in a society that wants us to be very much just cookie cutter. That's where it can like really be healing and help us to be in that place of like self.
Yeah. It's almost an opportunity for us to finally say, hey, this is who I am. And I don't know if it feels safer, but it's sort of like it doesn't really matter anymore. This is who I am, and accepting ourselves outside of that cookie cutter sort of boundary. Interesting. Yeah. It opens up a whole new world for many of us.
Yeah. And then if you think about that concept of to be great is to be misunderstood. And he goes on to talk about like, well, the Buddha or Jesus, Socrates, like all Pythagoras, like all these great minds were, they thought out of the box, and it kind of like led to their demise.
It did.
which,
It
I
did.
think we're in a better time now, I hope, a little safer, but yeah, that led to the evolution.
That's a good point. And sort of bringing this full circle, we were talking in the last session about how, there's still this reptilian part of our brains that says, oh, no, don't. Oh, be careful. And so I can't help but remember that all of these great leaders who weren't necessarily recognized for their leadership and their greatness in their time, but were later on, after they've been persecuted, assaulted, harmed, I don't know, even murdered, that
Mm-hmm.
they were honored at a later time. So there's still that part of us that says, well, look what happened to him, or look what happened to her.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like, I guess we have to push beyond that fear. That's so easy said than done, though, for sure, for sure. To me, it's like the things that help to maybe have a bit more courage is the like inner reflection, meditating, reflecting and acknowledging the fear.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of getting to like the root of what it might be, whether that's like past life work or regression. Some people prefer Akashic records. To me, it's like using the dream time to understand intentionally like what this might be tied to. And then where we can be the individual self, but still have connection to others, like go and speak with people that you trust. If it's a therapist, if it's friends, if it's a coach or mentor, if it's, your pastor, rabbi, whatever, who can you speak with? Like, just kind of like have like the ideas bounce off and the reminder of like, well, actually you are safe. And the beautiful thing about now, I know it's not the case everywhere in the world. There are people living in some places of the world where they cannot express their difference of religion or political views, which is really unfortunate. I think that will change in time. But like we do, for the majority of us listening here, probably live in a Western based, like capitalist society where we have a bit more of that freedom. And if anything, I hope we can continue to I want to say fight for, or at least stand and like acknowledge that that is very important for us to maintain. Because oftentimes that can be the attempter where we get stuck in those systems that want to stop that,
Do you mean for us to continue to fight for our sovereignty and our sense of self, even as much as we may be fighting for community and for a holisticness?
Yeah. And self-expression maybe is what I want to say. Like, I think there's different terms, freedom of speech. People use all these different, like really just to speak our truths is what it comes down to.
Interesting, when we were talking in part one about the witch wound, and obviously during the witch trials, and they happened over many, many centuries, many generations. It wasn't just one particular isolated moment in Salem. So I feel like there's still that ongoing, whether it's the wound or if it's still a little bit of the hunt, to persecute those who may speak out against or who may feel strongly about their own work way before it's even accepted, way before it becomes part of our normal system. And I am hopeful that in this new earth, we're creating more of an allowance, and that we're personally allowing ourselves.
Yeah. But it takes courage to do that.
It does. It does.
It's to face that ostracization from others. It just is making me think of this guy. I actually don't even think I know who he is. It just came across my Instagram. He, I think, is like a musician, some type of artist. And I hope it's okay. I talk about like vaccination stuff, but his whole thing was he got a vaccine and then it like caused a lot of serious physical harm to his body. And so much so that he basically had to give up doing his art, his craft. And he just posted this not too long ago, how he wanted to like speak about this, but everyone that he was involved in, whether these are like record labels, is kind of the impression I had. They were kind of, no, don't speak about it, that you just keep that out of it. And he finally was like, enough is enough. I need to share this part of my story. Like, it's part of me. And I'm being silenced. And he just wants to bring awareness and like share kind of the hardship that he had. And I know for sure he's not the only one, because I've been hearing different pockets of people with similar experiences where their life completely changed. because of a medical choice. And it's not a damnation of who's right or wrong. It's more just the individual's experience.
Right.
And reading this guy's posts and just feeling the energy of like that power now that he gets to come out from silence, which, you know, the Me Too movement, all these different things we've seen over the past like 5 years, Black Lives Matter, whatever, they're all like part of that. Okay, these are the things that have happened to us, the harms that maybe before were all okay. Like people just made it silent, pretended it was fine, you know, like no one really stood up for it, or if they did, they were made to be quiet or harmed.
Yes.
Now it's like shifting into something else. And that can like be really like activating for folks reading it or witnessing it. So that's, I guess, maybe something I just want to add to. If that's something that's coming up for people watching, listening to this today, that's where that shadow work again comes in of like, and I think I mentioned it in part 1, just that idea of like, well, how many times have I been on the other side of this scenario?
Right.
Where I felt silenced or I silenced someone, and just do the inner reflection, because I think that allows us to have a lot more like compassion for each other and our experiences on this earth. And that's really important.
So interesting. Of course, I'm funny how the victim sort of mentality comes on immediately when I think about, oh, I've been silenced, but have I silenced someone as well? Which of course didn't occur to me, but I'm sure there must have been some moment in some life somewhere in this collapse of timelines where I have silenced others. Otherwise it wouldn't resonate with me so strongly.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Well, I think your point about judgment and how when you flip the script on judgment really, really shifts your understanding of shadow work and what shadow really is. So I found that really fascinating in part 1. And I think that's a really valuable thing to share with our audience, because, you know, what seems like a shadow may actually be a benefit. It may actually be your superpower, or at least it may be a hyper awareness for you to sort of glean off of.
Yeah. And so how that was kind of explained to me was I was in this like business coaching group, and the lady was just like, okay, we're going to connect to like this inner demon, is how she identified it. And so the practice was to go in and have this connection to like this part of the self that is kind of like really difficult, or we don't want to look at. And for me, what came up was that energy of judgment, feeling judged, especially growing up in a very Christian home. Like that was so much, like pretty much every action, every word I spoke, it seemed like, oh, there's a judgment, or that impending doom of God is judging you and your every action. And so when we did this practice and then literally externalized this entity, or this, you know, this demon of judgment, and she kind of went on to say, now that energy is actually going to be like your ally, I guess you could say. And that's the thing that you understand so well, that you can help other people with that. And I'm like, well, totally. Like, I feel like that's a huge part of my work, even as a psych nurse, you know, the judgments people with like mental health and addictions receive. My life experience as a mixed person of color, as a woman, like there's so many things that I'm like, oh, I can see now how that judgment showed up, or I've witnessed judgment. Now it's like, I'm looking over at my altar, because I like even went to the point where I'm like, I'm going to make a little like clay figure of this energy as a representation of what that means, and seeing kind of what it transformed to was really empowering for me, because it like adds this value now where it's like, okay, this fear I had of being judged, or this fear I had of judging others, it's like there's something about that can actually be helpful. I can like transmute it into, or I am transmuting it daily into, okay, like love, really. I want to say love because I keep looking down. I don't know where this little heart has come from. It's like a little glitter heart. I have no idea where, but it's right on my desk, and it's just kind of funny that showed up, because it's like, to me, this is alchemy. It's like transmuting these darker shadowy parts into just heart opening, like compassion, love, acceptance of self and of others. So
I love that. That's beautiful. And it's so interesting that these little symbols are showing up to remind us of sort of the bigger picture, the bigger story here. It's not just about that judgment or that incident. That's sort of like a microcosm symptomatic incident, but it's really all about flipping that to lead us back to love.
mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 I think when we keep just returning to the heart space,
Mm-hmm.
that's what something I've been doing more in like meditation is just literally like in the heart. And there's certain like Kabbalistic and magical practices that I use to kind of really tune in there, whether it's like the divine names that we vibrate or, you know, certain visualization techniques. But it like, there's just something about this center self that really can be so inspiring and help support others.
What do you mean by divine names?
So in like the Western esoteric tradition, which draws a lot on like the Jewish mystic path of like Kabbalah, there are these different aspects of our like energetic field that they call them the Sephiroth. So there's these spheres, kind of like you could say it's related to the chakras, but it goes beyond that. But each of these have different magical correspondences, whether it's certain planetary connections, certain angelic connections, and then also like divine names of God. And so they're in the Hebrew. And basically, depending on the sphere that you want to activate, there's a vibration or like a intoning, a stating of that divine name of that sphere, because it's like a different aspect of God. And so, yeah, that's like a huge part of like different magical practices to vibrate divine names, angelic names, things like that.
I didn't know anything about that, Fola.
Oh.
How many people really understand that that is part of magic? That is part of studying the witchery. That is really fascinating to me. And that sounds like something that's really a system of guidance as well.
Yeah, I would say like I love that vibrational aspect, like sound and frequency. And especially when we think about it from like a scientific standpoint, your vagus nerve, right, which runs kind of along this part of the body. And, you know, people will tap at the heart space or like, you know, you could do bilateral tapping, different sorts of physical touch to stimulate it. Or you can do things like humming, right? Or like oming. All these are creating like a vibration. And to me personally, I feel like a lot of my like traumatic past experiences have healed. And I've like regulated my nervous system because of starting to practice these different magical practices of like vibrating these divine names. For me, it's also like vibrating the runes, like the Norse runes, because that's part of my like cultural background.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But the vibration literally like resets that vagus nerve is how I would describe. So, and I think of like Aleister Crowley, or like famous occultist that has kind of a bad rep amongst most people, but he kind of said that like when you're vibrating, you should vibrate the name so intensely, so like powerfully that you almost are passing out, or you do pass out. And so if we think about that, like, I mean, I don't think that's really ideal. How are you going to finish a ritual or like banishing or whatever if you're like laying on the floor, right? But how much that energy is that's moving and shaking out. Like I see it almost as when we vibrate it, it's like moving through the cells of the body and clearing out the things that no longer need to be there. So yeah, there's definitely something about it. I encourage people, if they're not comfortable with using different God names, or, you know, they're just kind of like in the mist, and maybe it's just literally humming or using any vowel sound or any word and just literally like as loudly and as strongly as you can. Well, loudly, but more as strongly as you can, as like I like to describe the vibration kind of coming from the chest up like this. So it's less about the mouth as it is like this internal rumbling.
Right.
I don't know if many magicians would describe it in that capacity, but that's just how I have learned to do it. It's like an internal sound, but doing that like every day for whatever, just in a meditation at the end for like 10 seconds, just notice how one feels with the vibration of a word or a sound. And yeah, it can be really, really healing.
What's some of the names that you've used? What are some of the angelic names or some of the divine names, that you've used?
Yeah. So like kind of relating again to the heart space. So in the heart on the tree of life in the Kabbalistic system is Tiferet, and it means beauty. You could even almost say it's not even like the heart. It's more like just beneath the heart, like kind of at the diaphragm. So it's almost between like the heart and the solar plexus. If one were to think about that, it's like very much a center space because there's two other points above and two at the bottom. But the name for the sphere of Tiferet is Yod He Vav He, Eloah Va Da At. And my understanding translation, I'm not a Hebrew speaker, so I just have to like say that and honoring the language and the people that they probably know best. But my understanding is that divine name means like the Lord God of knowledge, which, you know, is kind of fascinating too when we think about that like inner knowing or the sun aspect, which is what that sphere is tied to. Just knowing the self and how that's necessary before we could even like elevate our consciousness or enter into these like deeper communions with the divine. So yeah, that's one that I would say is like kind of at the forefront for me lately in my practice. And then another, I would just add another practice if someone wants to kind of be or is curious about some of this and how it aligns. Like just in general, like the middle pillar exercise, they call it, where we move through those 5 spheres. I have a video on my YouTube channel about that, but people can easily find all sorts of meditations and guided practice on it. And it's definitely like a good base practice, I'd say.
Yeah, it is. It's very powerful. I've done that a couple of times, both with Lucky and then with 22 Teachings. I've done it a couple of times. Oh, yeah. Really interesting. You wouldn't want to run through one of the names, one of the divine names during this, would you? Just to give everyone a sample of what it kind of resonates and feels like?
Yeah, we could totally do that.
Okay. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine. Just through one of the spheres, you mean, though?
Yeah, let's do that.
The whole middle pillar might take a little bit of time.
Yeah, that takes a long time. We'd be here for another half hour.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we could just do the heart. We could do that center heart space if that, you know, just because there is a heart right here. I wish I could pick it up, but I don't know if you'll be able to see. It's like so little, and that's very strange that it would be there. So maybe that's our sign.
Yeah, I think that's our sign.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, let's do that now then. Okay. Well, wherever you are, if it's safe to do so, you can close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths, just allowing your body to kind of come into the center space, maybe really filling your belly on that last breath in before letting it all go. And now bringing your awareness to your heart, to the center of your chest. If it helps for you to place hands on heart, you may do so, because sometimes we can be a little disconnected from the center place. And just taking a few deep breaths into your hands, into the heart, feeling the chest rise and fall, feeling the entire diaphragm expanding 360 degrees around you, creating space here and letting go of any expectations of what you will receive or experience during this short practice. And now at the center point of your chest, you begin to notice a ball of light. And this red ball of light is growing stronger and brighter with each breath in and releasing any tension, anything that's unnecessary, any thoughts, any worries. They can just go on the backside for now, and they'll be there and you'll be able to approach them when needed. But for now, focusing on this red ball of light in your chest. And you may also sense here that there is a pillar or a column of light running from this heart center up to your crown and above, and also down to your feet and just below into the earth. So there's a link here from above and below with this middle pillar, this column of light. And perhaps that too is feeding this red sphere in your chest space. We're just activating this whole pillar, activating the red heart chakra, this Tiferet center. And we are going to activate it further with the divine name, Yod He Vav He Eloah Va Da'at, Lord God of knowledge. And so you can vibrate along with me or just simply hear the vibration, continuing to focus on that heart space. Yod He Vav He Eloah Va Da'at. Yod He Vav Yod He Vav He Eloah Vada Yod He Vada. And simply just noticing what you notice, heart beating, energy expanding, just taking that with you as you go through the rest of your day. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. That's so beautiful. That is powerful and simple.
Yeah. And even without the vibration, I think, the more I'm like reading and learning things, practicing, I'm realizing and also witnessing different people sharing, these different practices that have come across time and evolved. I think it's really about like making it our own. Some people might not agree with that, but I do kind of going back to that self-reliance essay. He kind of says that at a few different points of just, the parent shouldn't be the future, it's the child. And so as we evolve and things change, we can't look to old ways of being, old religions, old cultural, values or aspects. It has to, and that's to me about us exploring these different practices and making them our own, whether you share it or not with others. Make it and do what feels true for you. And that will also evolve as time goes. That's something I've definitely had to move through because it's like, cultural appropriation, all these different aspects. I think that we can do things in a way that's still respectful and honors like where it comes from and the benefit, but not everyone's going to agree with that. That's okay.
Right. I think that also has to do with us allowing ourselves to be seen, to be heard, to allowing ourselves to hear ourselves. Like, that's okay. You can have your own style to this. That's what works for you. Just like a diet or, clothing style or your work. I mean, you can energetically, consciously, spiritually decide what your own, what vibes for you.
Yeah, exactly.
That is such a beautiful thing. Thank you so much, Fola. I mean, that is powerful as we move into this holiday season. Also, that is such a beautiful, powerful thing to do for a brief moment, just to set the stage for your own, your own entrance into daily life. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think we can wrap up here with that. That's so powerful. I think that leaves the universe with such a nice place to be.
I agree. That's totally, we could all enter out with some heart space and see where we maybe are being called to share that with our communities, with others, our loved ones. And so, yeah, thank you so much for having me here, Diana. And thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to list in the description, of course, how we can get in touch with you, how we can connect with you, have a session with you, join one of your group workshops, all of those beautiful things. I hope we'll be hearing more from you, seeing more from you on sort of a planetary level, because you have so many beautiful gifts to share.
Thank you. Thanks, Diana.
you really have done a lot of studying of the dark feminine of the divine feminine. And I'm curious to know if you feel the divine feminine is coming into power and that our shadows, which have been shunned, are really part of our power.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I think for any aspect, like the shadow are those parts of ourselves that we would rather not admit, and yet they like can contribute to our greatness. And that's actually one area. I was like working with a coach recently, and something that was showing up a lot in my life was this like fear of judgment and receiving like judgment, say from my like parents, because they don't really agree with everything that I do. And so going into this like kind of like a shadow work process to tune into the energies of how it is I want to show up. It came out. It was like the main, like kind of like demon. That's kind of what our shadows are. These demons was this idea of judgment. And the learning out of this whole process for me was that like judgment that I have like feared, the judgment that I hate when I myself can be judgmental towards others, because that's another part. We see the judgment in other people doing it to us or witnessing them judging others, for example. But really what's happening is we ourselves are holding that same energy towards people in our world or towards ourselves. And so we like want to put up this block. And I just came to this deep understanding of like, oh, like that judgment is actually exactly how I can support people who also have felt judged or also go through judging themselves, because it's like I have such a deep understanding of what that looks like, what that shadow aspect is. And so that's how, to me, it's become like a strength. And then you can get into like, well, judgment, discernment, how sometimes judging can be such a beneficial thing. But yeah, like the shadow work part's like huge. We have to be willing to see and acknowledge these parts so that we can become the whole self in that strength place.
I think that's really powerful. And I think, we're very quick to dismiss and to judge our darkness, our shadows, and I really hope that feeling doesn't come back. I hope that aspect of judgment doesn't come back. I'm so harsh on that person or harsh on myself. But I'm curious how you feel we can flip the script on that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because like prior to the Halloween time, we were coming across all these like stories and movies about witches. And I was watching it and I started getting like, why do I keep seeing this? Like, I understand I have the witch wound. Like, I think we all do. Like, why do I have to keep seeing these old time, like, medieval days where people are capturing the woman and then burning her at the stake? And then it like hit me. I was like, whoa, that's actually not what I'm being shown. What I was being shown was I was the person that has burned other people, who has condemned or made other people wrong in the past. And so I'm just speaking that as like can we like, that I think is really the shadow work is, okay, yes, we've all been the victim, but how many times have we been the perpetrator? And like when we can, you mentioned like balance, like when we can be on both sides of that, to me, that's the tree of life in the Kabbalistic system. We have the pillar of mercy and the pillar of severity. We can be in both of those places. We have to acknowledge that. And especially as the feminine, because the feminine is that severity, like pillar. At the top is Bina, the mother. She is like the intense Saturnian, like devourer, but she also births us. So there's like this beauty of both that I think we have to embody. It doesn't mean we go around just like destroying people, but when we can embody and recognize that we have the potential of all those things inside. So that was like a huge wake up call for me. I was like, whoa, now I get why I keep seeing this story. It's like, because I had to witness myself in the other shoes.
That's cool. I mean, that's super cool. You were able to do that. We were talking about the dark shadow and the power in that. And then talking about how you were able to flip your own script and see yourself as the perpetrator, not just as the victim, but as the perpetrator. And I have to say, I relate to that. I was seeing all this stuff, as you said, around Saman about Frankenstein and the witches. And I'm, of course, super fascinated by that and drawn to it as somebody who has a witch background as well. But it's so interesting how it will trigger me as well. It feels both almost like a community. It's like a calling. Oh, there's my sisterhood. But that at the same time, there's a lot of sadness, and I could feel the collar around my neck literally a few times.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's even as you're saying that all, like, it's making me think of like kind of the energy of that dragon, which is sort of what you'd reached out to me initially, right? And if we think about like the dragon kind of being the one that goes and burns down the village, oftentimes, at least in the stories that I can think of, it's like there's a reason for that. It's almost like they're protecting something, right? So the perpetrator is the victim, is like trying to like create its own sense of safety and self, but goes out, and to me personally, I don't want to get like political here, but I kind of see that even with a lot of our world political situations that we have going on at this point. So it's like if we can tune into that within ourselves, or feeling so unsafe with their basic needs not being met, they oftentimes would have these outbursts or react sometimes in that fight, flight, or freeze way, oftentimes in aggression, because that was like really the only way they could stay safe. And when we can like perceive that like there might be some other reason why people behave the way they do, usually for a sense of safety of self-preservation, it makes sense. And I think we can have a bit more compassion for each other at that point.
I'm sorry, you were saying with their basic needs not being met?
Yeah, that if someone doesn't feel like their basic needs are being met, they go into like self-preservation mode where they could become that aggressor, or, kind of having outbursts to try to keep themselves safe. And so it just can put us in a place of compassion when we can see why someone might act a particular way. And that to me is shadow work. It's like acknowledging we all can be this, light or dark, in the world.
So that's a huge blessing. That's a beautiful thing to say. And that's super helpful as well, because we see so much going on. I mean, I just left Los Angeles where we've had ICE raids, and I don't want to enter politics, but at the same time, you have to be a human. I knew people who were hiding, who have lived in the United States for 30 years, but they were afraid, and I couldn't help but have compassion for that. And yet on the other side, I understand as well. So, and perhaps that's not the best example, but certainly, I mean, there's so much going on, tumultuously speaking, as leaders change and countries change and our economy shifts, and so much of that. There's so much of the darkness that's coming up, which is good. It's being revealed. But simultaneously, I appreciate that you're willing to share compassion with that.
Yeah, and that can be hard when you're like in it, witnessing, different atrocities or the challenges people face. Like, it's not an easy choice, compassion. And to me, that's the shadow work again. It's like feeling whatever is showing up. If it's anger, right? If it's denial, if it's like sadness, grief, like what confusion, like any of these parts that are arising amongst the state of our environment or our situation, internally or externally, like out in the world, just like feeling it and being with it. And that's what's changing. And honestly, like for me, having been very heavily involved in like the spiritual communities for quite a few years now, I kind of like stepped back for the last like a year and a half, because I was just really feeling this, like, I guess more than that now, because I was just kind of feeling like, oh, there's just so much fluff, and this whole love and light kind of complex, and the denial of the dark parts, the denial of that shadow. It just, there was something that was like a disconnect for me. And again, if we, a lot of people wouldn't agree with this, but like to me, God created everything, meaning God also from there was created that oppressor, the devil, that opposition to the light. And we can't have light if there's no shadow, and vice versa. There has to be both. And, I had this really weird realization in the bath yesterday. I was like, my hands were like positioned in the water, and there was a candle lit kind of a ways away, and I could just see this little pinprick of light on my like thumbnail. And I was just staring at this little pinprick of light. and realizing, wow, like there's no light anywhere else. Everything else is dark except.
So these must be powerful messages, because here we are on 11/11. It's Mercury retrograde, and we're having a little bit of internet instability. So we're going to schedule a part 2, but Fola is being such a leader in sharing her work with the shadow and bringing up issues in the spiritual community about how we kind of like to go, gee, everything's going to be great, and then not really deal with our shadow. But there's power in our shadow.
Yeah, and I appreciate you having me here, Diana. I think having further conversation about this, especially with like 3-Eye Atlas or whatever coming on board very soon, like closer to our earthly plane, I think it'll be important. A lot will be shifting for people. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you very much. I mean, I think this is a super valuable conversation, and I certainly look forward to continuing it.
Yeah, thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Soul Fam podcast. Be sure to tune in to every episode, where we dive into a different rabbit hole of the known and unknown to empower you in conscious living and exploration of the greater universe. We hope you leave each episode with a little stardust in your hair and inspiration in your heart. With love from your Soul Fam.